The feeling to willingly move crowds is so thrilling. Even Prince Charles is willing to pay shillings.
Hello, world, and welcome to another episode of Songs in the Key of G with your host, me, Mark G. Now, tonight's subject is a very special one to me. Beastie Boys tonight. We're going to do my favorite album from them. So I hope you enjoy this as much as I'll enjoy bringing it to you. Beastie Boys are Adam Horowitz, a.k.a. the King Ad Rock, Mike Diamond, a.k.a. Mike D, and Adam Yauch, a.k.a. MCA. Now, as a band, they undergo quite a transformation. They started off as a combination of two hardcore bands, and when I say hardcore, I'm talking about the punk subgenre. Think Agnostic Front, Bad Brains, Black Flag, Minor Threat, later on became Fugazi. Very, kind of fast, aggressive, straightforward punk rock music. The first band was Mike D's Young Aborigines. Now, the Young Aborigines consisted of Mike D, John Barry, and Jeremy Shatton. Then there was The Young and the Useless, and that was Adam Horowitz's band. And through a series of events, the Young Aborigines lost Jeremy Shatton, gained Adam Yauch, and also Kate Schnellenbach, who Kate Schnellenbach was part of the band Luscious Jackson, who then, after everything comes full circle, releases the debut album on the Beastie Boys label Grand Royal. Shortly after Schnellenbach and Yauch joined the Young Aborigines, they changed the name to Beastie Boys. And they play a small party for some of their friends, and a guy named Dave Parsons, who owned a record store called the Rat Cage that was kind of the home base for all those kids at the time, said, hey, why don't we make a record? And they said, sure. And with that, Rat Cage Records was founded, and the Beastie Boys first release, an EP called Pollywog Stew, a collection of hardcore songs, was released. In 1982, shortly after the release of Pollywog Stew, John Barry is replaced by Adam Horowitz from The Young and the Useless and solidifies the Beasties lineup as Horowitz, Diamond, Yauch, and Schnellenbach. Now, they were actually pretty successful as a hardcore band. They opened up for Bad Brains. They played gigs at CBGB's, so this was not a failed effort. The first time back in the recording studio with Horowitz in the lineup, produced a song called Cookie Puss. And what Cookie Puss was really a departure from what they had been doing. It had a kind of a hip-hop beat, and the vocal consisted of recordings of Adam Horowitz calling the Carvel Ice Cream Company and pranking them, asking for Cookie Puss, which Cookie Puss was an ice cream cake that they made. So basically this record was a beat with recordings of him prank calling the poor woman at Carvel Ice Cream. Now, Cookie Puss is a weird record because it's kind of hard to define. It's kind of like a hip-hop song and kind of like a punk song, but not totally like either. And it caught the interest of a lot of folks on college radio and club DJs where it started getting some play. One of the DJs that was playing it was a guy named Rick Rubin, who obviously later on started Def Jam. A lot of people think that punk and hip-hop aren't very closely related, but they really are, and especially back in those days. Well, first of all, they're both made with that same renegade DIY spirit, especially back then. Hip-hop was not the path to popular success that it is today. It was underground, and it wasn't recognized as a true genre. Also, the downtown clubs started inviting the hip-hop folks down there to perform. So you could see Grandmaster Flash, or you could see Africa Bambaataa at the downtown clubs, and that's where a lot of these white punk rock kids started getting familiar with that. In fact, Grandmaster Flash opened for The Clash. So they hook up with Rick Rubin, who at the time was calling himself DJ Double R. And when they did shows, they would split time. They would do their punk set and play their instruments. And then Rick would come out and set up the turntables, and they would do Cookie Puss. And as they continued to work together, they just kind of gravitated more in the hip-hop direction. And Kate Schnellenbach eventually fell off, and it left it to be the three of them and Rick Rubin. And that's where they really started concentrating on being a full-on hip-hop outfit. Their first straight-ahead rap release with Rick Rubin on the production was a song called Rock Hard, where Rick Rubin looped up the guitar break from AC/DC's Back in Black. And really, you can see where he started to kind of put his suburban, Long Island white boy spin on it right there. I didn't hear that song when it came out, but I've heard it after the fact and not good. My first introduction to Beastie Boys came in 1985 when I heard them do a song called She's On It on the Crush Groove soundtrack, and I hated it. I thought it was gimmicky. It was them over rock guitars. The lyrics were lame, and I hated it. Then in 1986, Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin and Def Jam Records puts out the album License to Ill. And the lead single was Fight for Your Right to Party. And I hated that too. For the same reasons that I hated She's On It. It just seemed gimmicky to me. It seemed like, hey, have the white boys act stupid while they screech over rock guitars, and they can be drunken idiots, and it'll be really, really funny. I just didn't think it was really funny. But of course, Fight for Your Right blows up, and every muscle-bound, tough guy is screaming the lyrics to that song as they smash beer cans, and it just was not appealing to me. So one day my buddy picks me up and he asked me, hey, have you listened to Beastie Boys' new album? And I told him, I've heard the single and what I knew from the Crush Groove soundtrack, and I'm not really that into it. And he said, yeah, I get what you're saying, but I think you should probably check it out. So he pops in the tape into his Alpine. Those who know. And he plays for me the album. Now, I definitely heard songs on there that I didn't like. But I also heard The New Style, Time to Get Ill, Paul Revere, Hold It Now, Hit It. Those were great songs, and they're about as hip-hop as you can get. And they were really great because they also, as hip-hop as they were, there was also that kind of that tinge of white boy in just the right amount, that made it relatable to me. And it just rang more authentic to me. And it just kind of goes to show you that a lot of times when we're looking for acceptance or credibility or respect, we're tempted to act like something that we're not. And I think that sums up Beastie Boys at that point. I think Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons kind of packaged them up as a bit of a novelty, as evidenced in this picture. And it just wasn't really true to who they actually were. But those songs seem to give me a glimpse in a little bit more of a hip-hop direction, but also a much more creative and genre kind of bending music than I had given them credit for to begin with. Contrary to popular opinion, hip-hop does not ask that you be any specific race, ethnicity, gender, or even age. All hip-hop really requires of you is to be authentic. So if you authentically express yourself and your connection to this culture, that's really all that anyone and hip-hop itself can ask of you. After the release of the album, they hit the road as the opening act for Run DMC's Raising Hell tour. And their drunken antics and wild lyrics created a reputation that kind of preceded them. It became what folks expected of them. The Beasties basically decided that, hey, we're kind of done acting like this. That really kind of led to them leaving Rick and Russell and Def Jam because they just didn't want to do that anymore, and Rick and Russell really had no motivation to have that change. They were ready for another Fight for Your Right to Party. It was getting huge rotation, and it was a huge hit for them, and they didn't really want to see the guys change. So they decided to move on, and they went to Capitol Records and moved to Los Angeles to start working on their new album. So they've moved to LA, and they're just trying to decompress from all the License to Ill madness. And they rent a house from a couple named Alex and Marilyn Grassoff, which Mike D then promptly raided Marilyn Grassoff's wardrobe. And it was in this more relaxed and creative environment that they began to feel like themselves again and really started getting into the writing for their second album and, in my opinion, their true masterpiece, Paul's Boutique. One day, Adam Horowitz is hanging out at his buddy Matt Dyke's house, and Matt Dyke plays him some songs that a couple of his friends made. Michael Easy Simpson and John Gizmo King, collectively known as the Dust Brothers. Now, Horowitz hears these songs, and he goes crazy. Sampling is in its infancy at this point. And, we had heard things where folks would loop up some James Brown or, something like that. That was what sampling was. But what Horowitz heard here was much different. These were very complex and layered songs, sometimes having, 15 to 20 samples in one track. And it was decided at that point that he wanted the Dust Brothers to produce the album. So Matt Dyke, along with the Dust Brothers, then signed on and agreed to produce the entire Paul's Boutique album. And the result is incredible. Paul's Boutique is an album that raised sampling to a different level. It's estimated that Paul's Boutique contains somewhere around 300 samples. There is no way you could make that album today. And it's beautiful, too. They're sampling everything from Mountain to Sweet to the Commodores to Johnny Cash, just this crazy mix of all these different sounds making this lush, layered musical soundscape for them to rap on. When I heard those beats, they blew me away. It was nothing like I had ever heard before. And in fact, 1989 was a really great year for sampling because there was one other record that came out that year that was kind of on that level in terms of sampling as well, and that was De La Soul's 3 Feet High and Rising, produced by the great Prince Paul of Stetsasonic fame. Now, when I say you could never make that album these days, what I mean is it would be way too expensive. You could never clear all those samples. I mean, they sampled the Beatles. I'm pretty sure you're not getting a Beatles sample cleared these days, let alone the hundreds of other ones that they used. And that's what's really beautiful about this record, is because it was a moment in time that could never be repeated again. You could never, ever make that record again. And it really makes it a pretty special thing because of that. So 1989 comes around, and they are ready to release Paul's Boutique. And they put it out, and they're super excited about it because they figure this record is so much better. We've got so much better beats. We're doing so much more in terms of our writing and our style that if License to Ill was a huge hit, then this one just has to be a huge hit too. and it was a commercial flop. When I bought it, I fell in love with it. The lyrics were so smart and the beats were incredible. This is not only my favorite hip hop album, right? It is my favorite album. I love Paul's Boutique. Now, of course, these days it's fashionable among music heads to talk about how much they love Paul's Boutique. But let me tell you, the majority of people hated it. And at the time, I found the lack of commercial success surprising. But in retrospect, I don't find it surprising at all, because what was happening is they were losing those musclehead fight for your right to party guys and really solidifying themselves with a core group of fans that would stick with them throughout their entire career. Now, the lyrics really appealed to me because they were super smart, super funny, laden with drug references and you know, this kind of outlaw lifestyle theme that really appealed to me, because that's pretty much how I was living back then. So when I heard a lyric like making like a DT, driving a Grand Fury, wherever I hang my hat is my home and my past is kind of blurry, every dog'll have his day, mine'll be in front of a jury, I'm a high plains drifter, you know I'm never in a hurry. So the record begins with the slow building mellow intro to All the Girls, which then leads into the high powered Shake Your Rump. Now I rock a house party at the drop of a hat, and I beat a biter down with aluminum bat. A lot of people, they be jonesing just to see me rock the mic. They be staring at the radio, staying up all night. So like a pimp, I'm pimping. I got a boat to eat shrimp in. Nothing wrong with my leg, I'm just B-boy limping. I got arrested at the Mardi Gras for jumping on a float. My man MCA got a beard like a billy goat. So on top of that, the beat is just insane. It's one of the best beats on the record. Really great bass and great scratching. And it is complete with a bong rip breakdown. What more can you ask for? The next song is a song called Johnny Rael, about a down on his luck old blues man who became homeless and is living in the neighborhood. It starts off, Johnny Rael is the bum on my stoop. I gave him 50 cents to buy some soup. He knows the time on his fresh Gucci watch. He's even more older than my mayor Ed Koch. The next song is Eggman, and that goes over a Curtis Mayfield sample, and it basically talks about throwing eggs at people. And it's a not so subtle callback to a song that they did in their hardcore days on the Pollywog Stew album called Egg Raid on Mojo, which Egg Raid on Mojo was about a bouncer named Mojo who never let them into the clubs, so they decided to go get a bunch of eggs and throw them at him. And this song was kind of a callback to that. Saw the convertible rolling by, loaded up the slingshot, let one fly. He went for his to find he didn't have one, put him in check direct with my egg gun. The next track is High Plains Drifter, and it's one of my favorites. In fact, I've already quoted it earlier in this video. It's a song about driving around and raising hell. Pulled over to the river to take a rest. Pulled out a pair of pliers, pulled a bullet out of my chest. Fear and loathing crossed the country, listening to my 8-track. Reached behind the seat and snatched a cooler from the pack. Long distance to my girl, and I'm talking on the cellular. She said that she was sorry, and I said, yeah, the hell you were. Check the rearview mirror. Checked the gold tooth display, checked out the odometer, and I was on my way. Next up is the Sounds of Science. Sounds of Science really incorporates a few cool Beatles samples and some pretty clever lyrics regarding science. It starts off with the sample from the Beatles, When I'm 64. Now here we go, dropping science, dropping it all over. Like driving around the town like when you're driving a Range Rover. Expanding the horizon and expanding the parameters. Expanding the rhymes of sucker MC amateurs. And Noggle Isaac Newton Scientific EZ. Ben Franklin with a kite. Getting over with a key. Now rock shocking the mic of the many times to times tables. Rock well to tell the tale all of the old fables. And from there, it goes into a pretty cool beat change to the Beatles again, but the drum break from the end of the Golden Slumbers medley from Abbey Road. Pretty great song. Next up is 3 Minute Rule, and it's a Mike D feature with him going over a pretty raw, super dope drum break with some kind of minimalist scratching in the background. I stay up all night. I go to sleep watching Dragnet. Never sleep alone because Jimmy is the magnet. I'm so rope. They call me Mr. Roper. When the troubles arise, you know I'm the cool coper. Next up is Hey Ladies, which was the first single released off of the record. It features a Commodore sample from the song Machine Gun, and the video that they released has a very heavy 70s disco vibe, again, where you can see Mike D wearing all Marilyn Grassoff's clothing. Hey, ladies in the place, I'm calling out to ya. There never was a city kid truer and bluer. There's more to me than you'll ever know, and I got more hits than Sada Horror O. Tom Thumb, Tom Cushman, or Tom Foolery. I date women on TV with the help of Chuck Woolery. How many times has Sada Horror O been mentioned in a hip-hop song? I'm willing to bet that this is probably the only one. Next up is 5-Piece Chicken Dinner, which is a banjo kind of hoedown interlude that leads right into the next song, which is Looking Down the Barrel of a Gun, which has more of a rock feel. They have guitars, and it's kind of a more heavy song. I'm rolling down the hill, snowballing, getting bigger. An explosion in the chamber, the hammer on the trigger. I seen him get stabbed. I watched the blood spill out. He had more cuts than my man Chuck Chill Out. Next is Car Thief, and Car Thief is one of my favorite songs. I really love the beat. It has just this heavy pounding bass and these awesome cuts of kind of like these screeching car tires. It really, really sets the mood, and the lyrics are great. I'm a writer, a poet, a genius. I know it. I don't buy Chiba. I grow it. People always trying to get next to me. I had a beautiful experience on ecstasy. I smoke up a bag of elephant tranquilizer because I had to deal with the money-hungry miser. I smoked a cane-filled cool with my man Rush. Saw my teeth fall in the sink as I started to brush. Rush is Russell Simmons, and he's talking about smoking a cane-filled cool with him. So it was the 80s. So Car Thief leads right into the next song, which is What Comes Around. And that is a song that they kind of dedicate to the California lifestyle and how they see it. Overripe fresh skis, California females with 3-inch cherry red press-on Lee nails. This song also contains one of my favorite lines on the whole record. You're all mixed up like pasta primavera. Yo, why'd you throw that chair at Geraldo Rivera? Making reference to the infamous Geraldo episode where Roy Innis just had enough of these skinhead Nazi guys talking their racist stuff, decided to snatch him by the neck, and a brawl ensued, and somebody threw a chair across the room and hit Geraldo in the face and broke his nose. Crazy time. Next song is Shadrach, which goes over a great Sly and the Family Stone sample. Riddle me this, my brother, can you handle it? Your style to my style, you can't hold a candle to it. Equinox symmetry and the balance is right. Smoking and drinking on a Tuesday night. From there, it goes into Ask for Janice, which is just a small interlude featuring the commercial for the Brooklyn Paul's Boutique. Now, after that comes a selection called Bboy Bouillabaisse. Now, Bboy Bouillabaisse is the 15th track, but Bboy Bouillabaisse also consists of 9 different small tracks. Now, initially when the record came out, Bboy Bouillabaisse was just one long track. It took about, I think it was like 12 and a half minutes or something like that. And now in newer releases, they have that kind of divided up into sections. It is really a collage of some of the greatest hip hop that I've ever heard. To me, Bboy Bouillabaisse is akin to, and I mentioned this earlier, that they sampled from this, but it really reminds me of the Beatles' Golden Slumbers medley on side 2 of Abbey Road. It's so good the way they put it all together. Now, I'm not going to break down every part of Bboy Bouillabaisse, but I strongly recommend that you consume it in order in its entirety. Go to cut 15 and listen to it all the way through to the end, because it's how you were meant to hear it, and it will not disappoint. Some of the memorable lines to me, one of them that I think of right off the top of my head is Mike D. I'm so high, you can call me your highness. So if you don't know me, then pardon my shyness. I live in the village, wherever I go, I walk to. I keep my friends around so I have someone to talk to. I play my music loud. You know I got clout to it. It's got a funky beat, and I can bug out to it. When this record came out, it really, really captivated me. And as I said before, this is not just my favorite hip-hop record. It is my favorite record. I love this record so much, and I strongly recommend that you check it out. Paul's Boutique, to me, is an immortal classic for 2 reasons. Number 1, the samples are crazy. The beats are insane. But number 2, they elevated their rhyming to a level that I don't think they've ever come back to. And no disrespect for the records that came after that, because I loved every one of them. And especially when they just, when they started their own label and they started putting out records by groups that they just liked. And Luscious Jackson, their friend Kate Schnellenbach, it was really nice to see them come full circle, come back and reunite with Kate, and then put their record out on Grand Royal. And I also have to shout out, if I'm bringing up Grand Royal, I also have to shout out DJ Strychnine and Paranorm, because those 2 guys are from my hometown, South Bend, Indiana, and they were signed by Grand Royal, and they put out music on Grand Royal. So to me, that gets no cooler. So big up DJ Strychnine and Paranorm. So we've come to the end of another episode of Songs in the Key of G. I've explained to you why I love Paul's Boutique, and really to sum it up, it's a combination of the great art, but also where I was in my life at the time and how I was living. And it wasn't always that positive. At times I felt like the High Plains drifter. But one thing that I can always say is that hip-hop has always been my North Star. Whenever I kind of got off the path a little bit, I could always reconvene with hip-hop. And I could always get my mind right with hip-hop. And because of that, hip-hop has really pretty much been the way I cope and motivate myself to do things still to this very day. It is truly the love of my life, and I'm so happy to share it with you guys. I wanted to thank a couple people, Brennan T. Harrell, Regularo Poet, and Interlamatrix. Guys, thank you for engaging in the comments and saying such wonderful things. It truly is universal, the love that our generation feels for this music. So thank you for checking it out. Everybody else, thank you for checking it out. Please subscribe. The interesting stat is that 88% of the people that watch these videos aren't subscribed. So please do that. As always, Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I enjoy bringing it to you. You know I love this stuff, and I'm going to keep these things coming. But until then, this is Mark G reminding you to please be good to each other. We need a little bit more of that these days. We really, really do. Strange days indeed. Until next time, peace.
If you love hip hop, it's to all the real MCs. Come on. If you love hip hop, it's to all the real MCs. Come on. Come on. If you love hip hop, it's to all the real MCs. Come on. Come on. If you love hip hop, it's to all the real MCs. Come on. Come on. If you love hip hop, it's to all the real MCs.